All right, you guys, dropping this episode a little bit early. Masahiro Sakurai is an incredible game maker. I hung out with a couple of witches at the movies. I don't know what the hell is going on with Black Ops 7, and one of my favorite PSP games is back. Welcome to Reviews on the Run. All right, let's start talking about Black Ops 7. This is the latest from Treyarch and about a dozen other studios under the Activision umbrella. This stars Milo Ventimiglia and a bunch of other Hollywood actors. Michael Rooker is in there. Has to say some incredible things in his script. And I played through the campaign on the stream, and I went back and played some zombies mode, and I played some multiplayer mode. And I'll tell you what, this game is kind of a muddled mess. It is a collection of a whole bunch of ideas. And yes, it does feel like AI has infected the story and also the way that this game is made. It feels like a quilt of Call of Duty ideas all slammed together. And I didn't like a big chunk of it, but then like a lot of Call of Duty experiences, there's stuff to love in this game. Multiplayer is a blast. I was playing the skirmish mode, which was 20 on 20 against lots of other people, and I was taking my wingsuit and diving into the fray and trying to take over territories and getting sniped by those campers and having a big smile on my face, loving it. I also really enjoyed the zombies mode. I thought that there's a bunch of different elements in zombies where you're hopping into trucks and you're busting through barricades and you're taking out hordes and hordes of beautifully modeled and rendered ghouls, and that's always super fun, and you get all kinds of cool weaponry, and your allies are there to heal you and protect you, and you can't do it alone, which is also kind of fun. I also enjoyed the top-down zombies arcade mode, which reminded me of Smash TV, and I always love to be reminded of Smash TV, so I had a good time with that. It was 4 players. We were facing off against wave after wave of zombie, and I had a pretty good time with that. I wish it was a little more elaborate. It's like the taste of a future potential Call of Duty smaller game, a lower budget game. But when you start to throw in all of these little pieces, and of course you can play, the gunfight mode, which is a much smaller arena, and you can play 5 on 5 and 6 on 6 and team deathmatches. There's a bunch of different ways that you can come up with the multiplayer experience and have a good time with it. It's just that campaign was just atrocious. It was just insufferably bad storytelling, and the setup was miserable. What they did this time is they set up a co-op campaign, which is engineered for 4 players, and you can play it alone, although it's a lot of like trying to find out what toggle I gotta toggle in order to figure it out, and then you can jump in and be alone. But you are really alone, and there's nobody, no AI pals with you, and you're still hearing from them. They just pop up in their little Zoom windows and they tell you inane things because the story is incomprehensible. And I just found that to be ludicrous. Now, I also tried to just jump online and connect with friends, and this does have crossplay, but that was kind of a bumbly setup, and trying to navigate through the menus, these really opaque menus, was way too cumbersome. We couldn't figure out how to get in-game voice chat working, crossplay. I'm sure a lot of this stuff is going to be ironed out. I'm sure patches are coming and tweaks are coming. This was the first time, I think, in a while that we've had like a really dedicated co-op campaign, but the campaign itself was just not a great story. There was, this sort of infection that keeps mutating things and twisting the characters' minds, and they're suddenly fighting giant Metroid-like plants and stuff. What they're doing is they're cross-threading all of these different historical elements from previous Call of Duty Black Ops games and trying to throw them in kind of like a big stew, but it ends up feeling tasteless and over the top. And even though the idea of balancing what you got to do with other people and presumably chatting with other people, which I couldn't figure out, would be kind of fun, I just didn't feel like the rewards were worth it. Although I do like that there's a whole end game campaign afterwards, which is much more like a Warzone sort of open battlefield kind of thing, where you're running from objective to objective and taking things out and leveling up in the end game mode. I thought that was kind of clever. There's a lot of good pieces and good initiatives in here, but I think what Call of Duty suffers from every time up to bat is that crushing weight of the delivery date. Like there's just not enough time to finesse everything and make everything as cool as it was put down on paper. They don't hit the sort of ambitions of the design document. I'm also not very impressed by the visuals of the game as well. I mean, there's some great eye candy, great reflections, and the combat and the animations and stuff like that is all pretty solid, but I'm not really crazy happy about the sort of cartoony gloss the game has got. It's almost like they're appealing to the Fortnite crowd with this and trying to open it up, and That might be sort of the long tail as Call of Duty just becomes increasingly a bigger part of popular culture, and the movie is coming, and they're looking over their shoulder at what Fortnite is doing with partnerships and stuff. Maybe they're chasing that a little bit as well, but it felt a little incongruous from previous darker toned Black Ops. Even Black Ops 6 last year was a much darker hued and themed story, and I dug it last year. And this feels silly and kind of G.I. Joe, Fast and Furious / Fortnite. All of it kind of felt a little off. Not the zombie stuff, and jumping into the multiplayer modes, really addictive. That compulsion of leveling up and leveling up your weaponry and going into Gunsmith and doing all that, that's all enjoyable. It's just a little bit of a disheveled monstrosity this year. You know, just all of these little pieces just don't gel in the way that you would expect this franchise to be able to consistently deliver because it makes all the money. It's not horrible because there's enough good to outweigh the bad. But yeah, I'm disappointed with this year's Call of Duty. I'm going to give Black Ops 7 a 7 out of 10. One of the super fun things I got to stream recently was Lumines Arise. This is from Enhance. This is Tetsuya Mizuguchi's company. They brought us Rez and Tetris Effect Connected. They know how to mix sublime music with really rad visuals, and that's exactly what we're getting here. This is a puzzle game. It's a gravity-based puzzle game where you're flipping around little objects and shapes and you're trying to disappear things. You've got this timeline that crosses over the piles of shapes that you're putting together, and it disappears one of the color combos. It's not quite as elaborate as Tetris, where you've got all of these different shapes. So these are just blocks that are coming down and you're flipping them, and it's just dropping colors basically on top of each other to try to erase everything. But there's this constant change that's happening as you're getting deeper into the journey, is what they call the single player kind of campaign of this. And the music is shifting and all of the background visuals are shifting, and it's so hypnotic and transfixing and beautifully composed. Some of it is just like crazy club music, like you're just going to be shaking and bouncing as you're playing the thing. You can't help but start to want to dance. And then some of it is a little bit more chill, a little bit more thoughtful, a little more sort of slow down and get hypnotized by everything. So it's a nice collection of music and visuals that just blows you away. And the gameplay is tight. There's lots of strategy. You really kind of get zoned into thinking and plotting steps ahead because you can combo a whole bunch of different colors all disappearing at once, and you start to feel like a bit of a superstar. But this is also one of those types of puzzle games where you think you're awesome in 1 second and then you make a mistake and then the whole thing is over and you've piled up too many blocks and you got to start again. But you don't mind because it's so addictive and it's so well composed. Now, I played this on the PC when I streamed it, but I think the perfect fit for this game, it's in VR as well. So if you've got PlayStation VR 2, I believe, or Steam VR, you can trip out in VR, which would be rad. I haven't played it in VR yet, but I played it on PC, but I preferred it on my handheld. I played it on the ROG Ally X, and it was like, yeah, this is like taking me back to the PSP days. The only quibble I had with the game is that some of the online functionality wasn't working quite right, so the leaderboards weren't loading up, and I wasn't able to play any multiplayer, but I love this. It's such an amazing and trippy game experience. I highly recommend Lumines Arise. It's not quite as good as Tetris Effect Connected. That's a masterpiece, but this is pretty damn close, and man, I love that music. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. All right, let's switch over and talk about the new Wicked movie. I went to the theaters to see Wicked for Good, which stars Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande and Jeff Goldblum and a whole cavalcade of very talented performers out there. I like the first Wicked movie. I'm a big fan of the movie musical, which started way back in the day with Singing in the Rain on TV as a kid and just being blown away by that. I just like the ambition and the joy and the energy that musicals bring to the table, and I definitely witnessed that with the first Wicked. It was so bombastic and so effervescent, and everybody in the movie was having such a grand time on these elaborate sets and this beautiful production design. All of that is kind of carried over in this film, but things got a lot darker towards the end of the first Wicked, and so we're reconciling with the ramifications of that. The Wicked Witch is being pursued, and she is hated by everybody, and Galinda the Good Witch, played by Ariana Grande, is really conflicted because she still has really strong feelings for her friendship with the Wicked Witch Elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo. And so there's a lot of mournful singing and a lot of dour songs and some pretty heavy moments, and there's a bigger kind of threat and just a darkness permeating through everything. And I found myself a little bummed out about what was going on in the story. And obviously the drama is building, but the songs just weren't taking me anywhere. I just found them to be a little bit somber, and the performances by the actors were also so downbeat. Even though they were cast against this beautiful backdrop, all of these incredibly beautifully composed images, like the flying monkeys and the Wicked Witch, and just the flight effects were just so damn cool. And I love the elaborate buildings of Oz, which reminded me honestly of Tim Burton's Gotham in the Batman movies that he made, which is funny. But I just loved the aesthetics of everything. I just wasn't into the singing, and I honestly felt like because I didn't get into the songs that the drama was a little undermined, because that's where they would go to as the drama was building, is like people would bust out into a song, but it was just bumming me out. And so I didn't have a great time with this film, and I was really expecting for there to be this epic crescendo and for all of these incredible numbers to whisk me away. And obviously this is focused on a dark part of the story in The Wizard of Oz, and that's the kind of slant on the angle that they're telling with this show. So I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but I certainly didn't leave the theater with that same sort of elation and wonder that I had with the first Wicked. Now I think fans of the play and the musical, which I am not, I'd never seen the live show, are gonna love all of this. Now in terms of a spectacle, this is a masterwork. All of the visual effects, every contributor that is a part of this movie, kudos to you. The amazing work that is really spellbinding. I just didn't feel like it all coalesced in a really compelling level up on what I experienced with the last Wicked. Now I think if you take both movies and put them together, you're in for a pretty remarkable bit of escapism, but I didn't like the sequel as much as the first one. I'm gonna give Wicked for Good a 7.5 out of 10. Atari shot me over the Namco Legendary Pack for their incredible documentary/video game collection called Atari 50, which is just a remarkable piece of software from Digital Eclipse. They have all kinds of video footage from the glory days of Atari. They dive deep into the story of how the company came together and how some of the games came together. And then there's a huge collection of arcade games, Atari 2600 games, Atari computer games, Lynx and Jaguar games. But with this Namco collection, they also give us some arcade games in the form of Exevious and Dig Dug, two fantastic Namco hits. And then they give us home versions of games like Pac-Man and Galaxian and Galaga, as well as Dig Dug and Exevious. And they tell the whole story of how Namco in Japan bought Atari Japan and got into video games, with interviews with luminaries like Nolan Bushnell. And I was enthralled, and it was such a treat to revisit Atari 50. I love Exevious, I love Dig Dug. It's amazing to have those arcade games in this collection. I'm not a huge fan of the Atari 2600 stuff, not Pac-Man, not the other arcade stuff. And honestly, when I dive into a lot of the 2600 games, it makes me emotional, because I bought some of those games at $50 Canadian or something like that when they were out originally in the 80s. And I love the cover art. The cover art's amazing. And one of the cool things is you can actually flip boxes around. They really fetishize the whole idea of collecting these things with this software, which I love. You can zoom right into all the artwork. But playing the games feels a little flat. But then they have Atari 5200 and Atari 7800 versions of some of these games. Playing Pac-Man on the 7800 or Dig Dug on the 7800, much better. But still, they don't compare with the arcade. This was really an era where the arcade was the zenith. That's where you got the best version of the software. But it's still an absolute must-buy. This whole thing, Atari 50 in general, but if you have it, get this DLC. It is 100% worth it. It adds a ton of extra value, and also all the details on how all of this stuff came together, with interviews with people like Todd Fry, who put the original 2600 Pac-Man together, which we were all so disappointed by, but it was a big feat of engineering, because the 2600 had no horsepower, man, and they still made some fun games for it. But it's a bit rough to play those games now. I do have a quick list, though, of my 10 favorite games in Atari 50. Let me run those down. This isn't in any order. I'd say Tempest 2000 is probably my favorite game on the whole collection for the Jaguar. Vector Sector is part of their Reimagined series, and it brings together a bunch of classic arcade experiences. Love Exevious, fantastic shooter. Black Widow's a cool twin-stick vector-based game. Dig Dug, awesome. Warbirds and Turbo Sub for the Lynx are terrific. Missile Command is an excellent arcade game. Asteroids and Asteroids Deluxe, love those as well. And Galaga on Atari 7800, terrific. Not as good as the arcade, but still really good. And in fact, any of those reimagined games I think are worth checking out. But honestly, this is such a terrific education for anybody that's interested in the history of video games, maybe wants to make games themselves, or just wants to remember a simpler time. But it's so beautifully packaged. And who knows, I have this feeling that Atari 50 might continue to expand. It is pretty iconic. Digital Eclipse really killed it with this. So I'd give the whole collection a 10 out of 10. My only quibble is I want more Lynx games in there. So hopefully Digital Eclipse and Atari are working on that. But it's still a 10 out of 10 collection, and I'd give this Namco Legendary Pack DLC a 9 out of 10. I didn't quite know what to expect from Kirby Air Riders for the Nintendo Switch 2. It's exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2, and boy does it take command of the horsepower of this platform. There is a ton of stuff going on in this game. I played Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube, the original game, and I thought it was pretty cool, but it didn't blow me away, and it certainly didn't make me feel like I was leveling up on the experience of a Mario Kart. And I was kind of concerned that Kirby Air Riders was going to do the same thing for me, but I've really come to realize this is nothing like the Mario Kart experience. Nintendo was positioning this as a vehicle action game. So you are racing around on these different machines, these little floating craft, these air riders, and they come in a whole suite of different styles. So some are better for leaping off into the air and sort of hovering for a little bit. Some are better for bashing through obstructions. Some of them you're kind of like on a unicycle. Some of them you're on a star-shaped thing, or you're on a paper airplane or something. So there is a complexity in the machines that you're going to command, and there's also some benefits from the characters that you get to play as well. And there is a ton of customization with all of this, mostly cosmetic, mostly paint jobs and things, but you collect so many different machines and you do so many things. This is where Masahiro Sakurai is just a genius with the way that he composes his games and puts his games together. We've seen this with the Smash series, where he just keeps stacking and stacking and stacking all kinds of interesting threaded ways to enjoy the experience and surprise you with new ideas. And that's exactly what's going on with Kirby Air Riders. It's relentless. There are so many different modes. You've got the standard racing modes, which are on a bunch of different tracks that look amazing, like the steam level and this sort of neon futuristic city level. I love the water races, where it actually you can pop out from these two water walls and like race into the water, and everything is so colorful and so beautiful, and all the visual effects are really breathtaking. But then there's also top-down racing as well, where it sort of evokes RC Pro-Am or Super Sprint or something like that, where you're racing around from this overhead perspective, and you still pick up power-ups and collectibles and things, but it changes the dynamic a little bit, and it's also an excellent breather from the core racing experience. But that's not all. I mean, you've got battles where you're just trying to chase after and knock out all of your opponents in a stadium-type setting. There are modes where you're just trying to gobble up as much food as you possibly can, or activate buttons, or get up as high as you can on a ledge, or knock down a giant pillar. It's so cool how much variety there is for you to just get lost in. And I also really appreciated that this is a game where it celebrates you playing through kind of a racing experience on your own. Like, it has a fantastic solo player journey. It's called a road trip, and it just keeps serving new things up to you. You race along on sort of like this over meta track, and you get to choose almost outrun-like which way you're gonna go. And then you'll run into an obstacle or an obstruction, and it will activate one of the mini experiences. So you might do a top race for a bit, or you might do a regular short race. It might be a boss fight or a boss race that you have to do. It might be you have to collect a bunch of keys and get them to a chest to unlock the treasure. It might be about collecting treasure. It might be about activating all of these buttons or whatever. You know, you're just constantly thrown a new idea. And then the rewards for each of these is you might unlock a new machine, or you're going to unlock new stickers that you can put onto your license, and there might be some new customization, new characters. It's just this constant stream of engagement. Like, play this for a bit, you're gonna just be thrown all of these new little goodies that you get to interact with. And that also applies to the online play as well. You get into this lobby area, and then you pair up with your pals, and then you jump into these online things, and there's progression there as well. So you're unlocking stuff in the online play that carries over into the single player campaign, and you're leveling up, and you're just improving and adding to the experience again and again. And there's also the ability to purchase machines, almost Forza-like, from an online kind of store as well, which is really cool, using the in-game currencies. I was just blown away by how much stuff was in this game. It is a remarkable experience, and it also plays very differently from the kart games. I mean, the core racing experience is these Air Rider machines. They're going forward without you having to press anything. It's really about your strategy about when to press the brake button, which is also the boost button. Again, in that Smash Brothers style, simplifying some of the mechanics, but there's so much precision and finesse in the way that you navigate these tracks and these courses and these challenges. For example, tilting forward on your Air Rider is going to slow you down. And there's a predisposition, I think, to like want to go a little bit faster. And I found myself constantly doing that, pressing up on the thing. And you can feel it in the rumble on the Pro Controller too, but you can also see it physically on the screen. Your craft is not doing well. But if you're in the air, you can tilt down to get a little bit more speed, and then you can tilt back to kind of float a little bit. There's also like a skydiving type mode where you're racing down and trying to go through these point hoops, just Superman 64 style, and get as many points as you can. There's so much in this game. I've had it for about 5 or 6 days. I played a ton of it. I played online. I had a great time with that as well. But I really also feel like there's just going to be so much more and so much more to uncover and discover in this experience. It's really fun. It's really beautiful. It looks great as well on the handheld screen. I played most of it on my big TV, and it really does fill the screen with all kinds of stimulation. I do feel like it might be a little overwhelming for people that don't play video games that much. And when you think about kart racing or arcadey racer type experiences, that's one of the genres where you hand a controller to somebody that doesn't play that often, and they kind of find their path and they have a good time. But I feel like this might be a little overstimulating. There's a lot of stuff flying at them. It's colorful. These characters are crazy cute. You can see that. I think that there's like an arcadey joy that's going to wash over people as they're playing it, but finding all of that minutia and all that detail, it's going to take a little bit of a gamer's sensibility. It's a little different that way when you compare it to something like Mario Kart World, which I think is a little bit more accessible. But that just speaks to Masahiro Sakurai and his team loading Kirby Air Riders with all kinds of technique and all kinds of satisfying reward. This is a cool freaking game. Do I like it more than Mario Kart World? And I know that's not quite a one-to-one, apples-to-apples kind of comparison. The answer is no. I still prefer Mario Kart World. Maybe it's because of my decades-long love of the Mario Kart brand, but I'm certainly blown away by how much there is to have fun with Kirby Air Riders. This is a remarkable piece of software. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. All right, you guys, that does it for our episode of Reviews on the Run. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for hitting that sub button and the thumbs up if you dug the video. Also, thank you for joining us for all of the live streams that we do. It's always a blast playing these games with you guys. I'll be back soon with some new videos for you. And until then, play forever.